He never missed a day. For nearly 3 years, rain or shine, 78-year-old Arthur Blake walked the same winding path to Oak Hill Cemetery. He brought the same bouquet of lilies. He sat on the same weathered bench beside her grave. And he spoke to his wife Margaret, like she never left. It was quiet, routine, sacred, until one chilly morning in October, he found a folded note resting gently on her headstone. No envelope, no signature, just 5 words that would change everything. "I still see him too." Arthur blinked, unsure if he was imagining it. The handwriting was delicate, almost too neat. He looked around. The cemetery was empty as always. The groundskeeper hadn't arrived yet. The gates had just been unlocked. He carefully picked up the note and unfolded it fully. There was nothing else written, no hint of who left it, no explanation. He read the words again. "I still see him too." His pulse quickened. "What does that mean?" he whispered aloud. For the first time since Margaret passed, Arthur felt something different at her grave. Not just presence, but mystery. He glanced at the headstone, ran his hand along the marble letters carved there. Margaret Ann Blake, beloved wife, beloved mother, forever my sunshine. He folded the note and slipped it into the inside pocket of his coat. Then he sat like always and told Margaret everything about the note, his confusion, his suspicions. "Maybe some teenager playing a prank," he said. "Or maybe you've got a visitor I don't know about." He chuckled softly, but the unease lingered. That night, Arthur barely slept. His thoughts churned with possibilities. Who could have left it? Why now? And what did they mean by, "I still see him too"? He didn't know anyone else who visited Margaret. And to his knowledge, no one had spoken to her the way he did. The next day, he returned as always, but this time he arrived earlier. He waited by the gate before sunrise. As the first golden light crept across the cemetery's grass, he walked to Margaret's grave, half expecting to see someone waiting. But no one was there, just silence and dew on the headstone. He sat, talked, waited. Still nothing, no new notes. But he couldn't let it go. Something had changed. Something or someone had entered this sacred routine. And Arthur Blake was determined to find out who. Arthur Blake had never thought of himself as the suspicious type. He was a man of habit, a retired librarian, a crossword enthusiast, a believer in order, quiet, and things that made sense. But that simple note, left on Margaret's headstone, had stirred something deep inside him. Curiosity, and the faintest trace of unease. Who else could be visiting her? And more strangely, who saw him? The next morning, Arthur made a change. Instead of approaching from the main path, he circled around the cemetery's outer edge, cutting through the narrow tree line that bordered the east wall. From there, he had a view of the row where Margaret rested without being seen himself. He crouched behind a low stone monument and waited. His knees ached. His breath came in shallow clouds, but he didn't move. Nearly 30 minutes passed. Just as he began to think the whole idea was foolish, he saw her, a girl no more than 16, stepping carefully through the grass, with a small notebook clutched to her chest. She wore a navy hoodie and Converse sneakers. Arthur's heart thudded. He watched as she approached Margaret's grave, knelt beside it, and laid a second note gently against the headstone. She sat in silence for a few minutes, eyes lowered, lips moving but too quietly to hear. Then just as quickly she stood and walked away. Arthur remained frozen. After she disappeared over the hill, he approached the grave. The second note was folded neatly just like the first. He opened it slowly. He looks so sad when he talks to her, but also like he still believes she hears him. His hands trembled. Who was this girl? How did she know him? And why did her words feel so sincere? That evening, Arthur made a decision. He returned to Margaret's grave with his own note. It felt strange at first, writing something to a stranger and leaving it out in the open. But something about her words moved him. He didn't feel threatened. He felt seen. He placed the note at the base of the headstone. "Thank you for noticing," She was everything to me. I don't know who you are, but I'm listening too. He stepped back, heart pounding. Then he walked home, under the fading light of the autumn sky, wondering what this new connection might become. The next day, the note was gone, replaced by a third. Can I tell you a secret? I don't come here for her. I come here because you remind me that love doesn't vanish. Arthur sat down slowly. His eyes welled up. He hadn't expected this, not from a stranger, not after all this time. He spoke aloud to Margaret, the way he always did. But now, his voice was softer, more reflective. I think someone's been hurting love, he said. Someone who's lost something too. Or maybe someone afraid to. He smiled faintly. And maybe, just maybe, you're helping them too. Arthur Blake had spent most of his life cataloging stories. He was the kind of man who remembered the title of a book after reading just the first page. But this unfolding story at his wife's grave was something even his sharpest instincts couldn't make sense of. Every morning brought a new note, and every note brought a deeper glimpse into a stranger's soul. I don't talk to anyone else about these things. I sit near your wife's grave because it feels like she listens. Is it weird that I've started imagining what she was like? The handwriting remained steady, neat, almost delicate. Arthur responded with his own notes, small replies, signed only with an A. He told her about Margaret's love of jazz music, how she used to dance barefoot in the kitchen while dinner simmered, how she read murder mysteries but couldn't stand horror movies. Each memory, he realized, wasn't just for the girl, it was for him too. Somehow, in sharing Margaret with this stranger, Arthur felt closer to her again. But the mystery still tugged at him. Who was she? And what was she searching for in these notes? So one morning, Arthur decided he wouldn't hide in the trees. He would wait openly, quietly, and kindly, just in case she came again. He arrived at dawn. The grass sparkled with frost. He sat on the bench beside Margaret's grave, the thermos of tea in his hand, and a small paper bag filled with warm cranberry scones. On the bench beside him, Margaret's favorite. And he waited. The cemetery remained still. Birdsong pierced the quiet. Then, the sound of approaching footsteps. He looked up to see her hood pulled low, notebook in hand, hesitating at the top of the hill. She froze when she saw him sitting there. Arthur smiled gently. "Morning," he said. "You don't have to run. I brought extra tea if you like." She lingered, clearly unsure. "I'm not angry," he added. "Truth is, I've been hoping to meet you." After a long pause, she stepped closer. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You didn't," he said warmly. "You've kept me company these past few weeks." She sat slowly on the edge of the bench, keeping a respectful distance. Her eyes were tired but kind. "I'm Lila," she said. Arthur extended his hand. Arthur Blake, Margaret's husband, for 51 years. She looked at the headstone. "She must have been amazing." He nodded. "The best thing that ever happened to me." They sat in silence for a while, sipping tea. Lila's fingers tightened around her notebook. Finally, she said, "I've been coming here since my mom died. But her grave's on the other side of the hill. I don't go there much." Arthur turned to her gently. "Why not?" She shrugged. "It's hard. We weren't close, but one day I saw you talking, like she was still here. And I just sat near you. It felt like safety." Arthur nodded slowly. "Grief is strange," he said. "It doesn't always sit where we expect it to. Sometimes it shows up in borrowed places." Lila looked at him with wide, damp eyes. "Is it okay that I felt peace here with her?" He smiled. Margaret would have loved that. From that morning on, the quiet between Arthur and Lila began to change. They didn't plan it. They never agreed to a schedule. But each day, like clockwork, they both arrived. Arthur with his thermos of tea and 2 paper cups, and Lila with her notebook tucked under one arm. They still sat on the same bench, still beside Margaret. But now, the silence had a rhythm. and the grief had company. Arthur told Lila stories, not just about Margaret, but about life, how he met her in a library, when she dropped her purse in the poetry aisle, how she used to beat him at chess by pretending not to know the rules, how they spent rainy afternoons listening to Ella Fitzgerald while watching traffic from the window. Lila listened like each story was a secret being unwrapped, and when Arthur paused, she filled in the spaces. She told him about her mother, Dana, how she'd been strong and fierce, but closed off, how she never said "I love you," but would always make sure dinner was hot, how she never cried, even at her father's funeral. "I didn't understand her," Lila whispered. "And I think she didn't understand me." She looked at Margaret's grave. "But here, I feel like your wife would have." Arthur reached into his coat and handed Lila an old photograph. Margaret, in her 30s, was sitting on a picnic blanket, barefoot with a book in one hand and a sunflower in the other. She had a quiet way of noticing people, Arthur said, even the ones who tried to hide. Lila traced the photo edges with her fingers. "I wish I'd had someone like her." Arthur smiled gently. "Maybe now you do." One chilly morning, as golden leaves danced in the breeze, Lila handed Arthur her notebook. "I want you to read something," she said. He opened it slowly. The first page read, "For Margaret, the stranger who let me belong." Arthur's eyes misted. He read Lila's poems, raw, aching, hopeful. They weren't perfect, but they were real. Each word was a puzzle piece, from a heart learning how to speak. "Lila," he said softly, closing the book, "these are beautiful. I never thought they were good enough," she admitted. He handed the notebook back. "They don't have to be perfect. They just have to be yours." That day, Lila brought a single white lily. She placed it at Margaret's grave. Arthur watched, his heart full. He realized then that what had started as a mystery had become a bond, not of blood, not of obligation, but of shared presence, two people finding light beside the same stone. As winter approached, Arthur found himself waking up with purpose again, not just to visit his wife, but to share her with someone who needed her too. The first snow of the season came early. Light flakes dusted the tops of the gravestones like powdered sugar. The trees stood bare and still, and the cemetery wore silence like a soft coat. But Arthur was there, scarf wrapped twice around his neck, thermos in hand, waiting on the bench beside Margaret. And just like clockwork, Lila appeared, except this time, her shoulders were tense, her walk slower. Arthur noticed immediately. She sat down, exhaled hard, and said quietly, "She called me." "Your mother?" Lila nodded. "I haven't spoken to her since the funeral, but she left a voicemail last night. Said she wanted to meet." Arthur sipped his tea, letting the words settle. "And how does that feel?" "Like I swallowed a stone," she said. They sat quietly for a while, snow falling softly between them. Lila pulled something from her pocket, an envelope worn and creased. "I wrote her letters after she died," she whispered. "Not to send, just to say what I couldn't before. I never showed anyone." Arthur reached over, gently resting his hand on hers. "Would you like to read one out loud?" She hesitated, then nodded. She unfolded the paper slowly, her voice trembling as she began. "Dear Mom, I don't know how to be angry and miss you at the same time. I want to yell at you for never telling me you loved me. But I also want to sit beside you and ask you what to do when everything feels impossible. You were the hardest person to understand, but I think you were scared. And so was I. I hope wherever you are, you know I'm still trying." Lila folded the letter and wiped her cheeks. "I didn't think I'd cry," she said. Arthur nodded slowly. "Crying doesn't mean weakness. It means something important got touched." He reached into his coat pocket, surprising her. "I brought something too." It was a faded, yellowed envelope, the ink barely visible. "I wrote this the week Margaret passed," he said. "You want to read it?" He smiled faintly. "I think I need to." He unfolded the letter carefully and began. "My dearest Margaret, I have no idea how to wake up tomorrow without you beside me. Everything tastes like cardboard. The sunlight feels colder. I keep looking at your chair and hearing your laugh in the walls. Everyone tells me to be strong, but the truth is, I don't want to be. I want to fall apart in the space you left behind, but I made a promise to keep showing up, to love you even when you're not here. So today I showed up, and I'll do it again tomorrow and the next, until the ache becomes something softer. When he finished, Lila leaned her head against his shoulder. They didn't speak for a long time. That moment beneath the quiet snowfall and the watching stone, something profound happened. Two lives shaped by loss had finally spoken truths they'd hidden from everyone, including themselves. And in that shared vulnerability, healing began. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Lila finally said the words out loud. I think I'm going to meet her. Arthur, sitting on their usual bench, with Margaret's headstone behind him, set down his thermos and nodded slowly. Your mother, she gave a shaky nod. Tomorrow. At the diner on 7th Street, noon. There was silence for a moment, broken only by a bird calling in the distance. Are you ready? Arthur asked gently. Lila swallowed. No. But I think I need to do it anyway. Arthur smiled faintly. That's usually when the most important things happen. The next day, she didn't come to the cemetery. Arthur still showed up out of habit and devotion, but he didn't stay long. He found himself pacing at home, checking the clock every 15 minutes. 1:00 p.m., 1:15, 1:40. He wanted to call her, but he didn't have her number. That fact bothered him more than it should have. At exactly 2:33 p.m., there was a knock on his door. He opened it to find Lila, eyes red, but jaw set. Well, she said, holding up a takeout bag. I didn't throw a milkshake at her. So that's something. Arthur laughed softly and stepped aside to let her in. They sat in his small kitchen sunlight, filtering through the blinds, as Lila recounted everything. She was nervous, she said. More than I expected. She looked older, of course. Tired. Arthur listened quietly. She told me she didn't know how to be a mother after my dad died. Said she thought being strong meant being silent. I told her silence felt like absence to a kid. She paused. She cried. I didn't. Not until now. Arthur passed her a tissue. Did it help? He asked. Lila shrugged. It didn't fix things. But I think we both finally stopped pretending it didn't hurt. Later that evening, as they returned to the cemetery together, Arthur said Margaret would have been proud of you. Lila smiled. I thought about her during the conversation, about how she listened to you all those mornings. Then she turned to him. Can I ask you something? Of course. What did Margaret do before she passed? Arthur looked at the headstone, his expression softening. She was a music teacher, taught for 35 years. Loved it so much, she'd hum scales in her sleep. Lila grinned. That explains the calm energy. Then Arthur hesitated. There's something else, he said slowly. She had a brother. Name was Thomas. They were close once, but they had a falling out. Why? Arthur exhaled. Thomas blamed himself for something that wasn't his fault. He never came to the funeral. Never wrote back when I reached out. Lila looked at him. Do you know where he is now? Arthur nodded. Moved to Arizona. I think about writing him again sometimes. You should, Lila said. Maybe it's not too late. Arthur looked at her thoughtful. Funny. I was just thinking the same thing. About you and your mom. They both smiled. It wasn't perfect, but healing never was. It was messy, quiet, and brave. The bench was empty. For the first time in months, Lila arrived at the cemetery and found Arthur's spot beside Margaret's grave vacant. No thermos. No old man wrapped in a scarf, humming softly to himself. No warm smile, greeting her with morning kid. At first she thought maybe she'd come too early. She waited, watched the wind stir the dead leaves across the path. Still nothing. By afternoon, concern outweighed patience. Lila didn't have his number, didn't even know his street address. She only knew one thing: Arthur Blake never missed a day. Never. So she went to the front office of the cemetery. A kind woman at the desk remembered Arthur and offered what little information she could. He's listed in our records under his wife's plot. Lives just a few blocks south. It wasn't much, but it was enough. That evening, Lila stood on the steps of a quiet, ivy-covered duplex. She hesitated, then knocked twice. A long pause, and then the door creaked open. Arthur stood there leaning heavily on a cane, his face pale but smiling. "I was wondering when you'd come knocking," he said. She stepped forward, alarm in her voice. "You're okay?" He nodded. "Mostly. Took a spill on the back porch yesterday. Doctor says I bruised a rib and banged up my knee. Nothing serious, but he told me to stay off my feet." Lila's eyes narrowed. "You didn't think to tell me." He chuckled. "Didn't want to worry you." She crossed her arms. Too late. Inside the apartment was cozy books, stacked in neat piles, old jazz, playing softly from a radio. A framed photo of Margaret on every shelf. Lila sat beside Arthur on the couch. "You scared me," she admitted. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't realize how much of my day depends on that bench until I couldn't get there." She looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Well, if you can't go to the bench, I'll bring the bench to you." The next morning, Lila showed up at his door with tea scones and a travel-sized Bluetooth speaker, softly playing Ella Fitzgerald. They sat on his balcony, wrapped in blankets, overlooking the neighborhood trees, and together they spoke to Margaret. Lila read one of her newer poems. Arthur told a story about Margaret accidentally dyeing the laundry pink. They laughed, they cried, and the healing continued. That night, as Lila was about to leave, Arthur handed her a small box. "What's this?" "Something I've kept for a long time," he said. Inside was a stack of letters neatly bundled with a blue ribbon. They're all addressed to Margaret, one for every year since she passed. I never mailed them, of course, but I thought maybe you could read one next time you visit her, since I can't be there right now. Lila blinked away tears. "I'd be honored." As she walked back through the quiet streets, the box held close to her chest. She realized something. Arthur had become more than a friend. He was her compass, her proof that love could live long after loss. And now, it was her turn to carry it forward. Winter melted into spring. The days grew longer, softer, and Arthur's strength returned slowly, like light creeping back into a once dark room. With the help of a cane and Lila's persistent encouragement, he finally made the familiar walk back to Oak Hill Cemetery. It had been almost 2 months, and yet everything felt the same. The wind in the trees, the bird song, the smooth curve of Margaret's headstone welcoming him home. Arthur reached the bench, eased himself down slowly, and smiled. "I missed you," he whispered. Then he pulled out a small bouquet of lilies, Margaret's favorite, and placed them gently at her grave. Beside him, Lila sat in quiet reverence, her hands folded in her lap. "I read every letter," she said softly, out loud, "just like you asked." Arthur nodded, eyes misty. She always liked hearing things in people's own voices. They sat in silence for a while. Then Arthur reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded note, his handwriting a little shakier now, but still steady. "I've been saving this one," he said. "Thought maybe I could read it here with you." Lila smiled. "Please." Arthur unfolded the paper and began. "My dearest Margaret, you wouldn't believe what's happened. I made a friend, a brave, brilliant girl who reminded me that grief doesn't have to mean silence, that even after you're gone, you still teach me how to love. She talks to you now too, and I think you'd adore her. She reminds me of you, stubborn, kind, and not afraid to say what matters. I used to think I came here because I missed you, but now I think I come because you're still giving, through her, through me, through all the words left behind. Love, always, Arthur. When he finished, Lila reached over and squeezed his hand. No words, just understanding. That summer, a small plaque appeared beside Margaret's headstone. It read, "In loving memory of Margaret Ann Blake. Her kindness echoes in those she never met." Beneath it, a second line added quietly by Lila. And in the notes we leave behind. Months passed, seasons changed again, and while Arthur no longer came to the cemetery every day, he always found his way back, sometimes with Lila, sometimes alone, but always with purpose. One day, years later, a young girl sat on that same bench, holding a notebook and staring at Margaret's grave. She was quiet, thoughtful. Next to her, Lila, now grown and grayer, smiled softly. "Do you want to leave a note?" she asked. The girl nodded and held it out. Lila unfolded it and read aloud. "To the woman who helped my grandma smile again." She blinked back tears. Margaret would have loved that, she whispered. Arthur came to the cemetery to speak to the past, but what he found was something far more powerful. A future that remembered, a stranger who became family, and a love that never faded, only changed shape. Because sometimes healing begins with a note left on a headstone. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about someone who changed your life in quiet ways. Don't forget to subscribe for more emotional, true stories of connection, resilience, and the surprising ways love lives on. We'll see you in the next video.